Hey y'all, it's Tommy again, with another kind of just quick look at a deck list. I just came off of winning, splitting a ProQuest on Saturday at Forgotten Path Games, and wanted to just give a quick kind of rundown on the event and my list, where I'm at with it, where I plan on going with it. A little sneak peek into my plans for the Battle Hardened, where I'll probably, hopefully not do horribly, but probably won't do like too crazy. We'll see. We'll see. But here's where I'm at with the list right now. It's feeling much better than what I had at the Road to Nationals event. It's feeling much better than what I played in LA. And I think the Pro Tour informed a lot for me about where Kayo's at and where to take him. So I wanted to give a quick update about it. So here's the list as it is right now. You can see the equipment suite has not really changed, at least mainboard wise, but we are on Spellfray now. And specifically, I'm on Spellfray gloves and Null Rune boots instead of something like Null Rune gloves and Spellfray boots. This was something that I've seen kind of back and forth, and what convinced me on gloves instead of, on doing the gloves and boots like this is seeing that Yuki Lee Bender was able to play Apex Bonebreaker into Rune Blades. And so I figured that's pretty good. I like doing that. I don't necessarily plan on rolling Scab Skins. If I'm in that position, it's probably a losing position anyway. So against the Rune Blades, I'm happy to take that and turn it into Might Tokens instead. So felt really good to do that. And Spellfray in general has felt very good into Kano, so I'll get into that in a little bit. But that is the equipment suite that's changed so far. In the main board, you will notice Enlightened Strike is back. It's a card that I was not on at the Road to Nationals event, and I didn't feel horrible about it, but I did. It's been a weird card for me, largely because there are times where it's really awkward, but there's also times where it absolutely saves the deck. And I think when I was initially on it, it felt good, but I didn't really know how to utilize it best. And now that I have had many reps into KO and figured out kind of the deck a lot better, I feel a lot better about the card. So we have that card back. And we also have Blue Mighty Windup back. This is kind of just a philosophy shift for me, going from thinking about KO as a mid-range deck and going back to kind of he is an aggro deck that just has the ability to be flexible and versatile. And Mighty Windup allows you to maintain that. I think it does clash a little bit with the red Agile Windups that I'm running, which I'll get into as well in a minute. But I think generally speaking, the card is just worth running. It's very flexible because it's a blue. And being able to give Claw Go again, being able to make Might Tokens, things like that are very important. I think a big philosophy shift I've had with the deck is you want to break Mandible Claw as frequently as possible, and Windups do that very well, so you run them. Other than that, I think the list is generally pretty samey to what I was running at the Road to Nationals. I'm running 22 blues. I'm not running Send Packing at the moment, which I'll get into because it's more of a sideboard thing for me. And yeah, I think that's all there is here to talk about that's different. You'll see here in the sideboard, Bearfangs is currently considered a sideboard card. This is largely just because I'm still contemplating how many no blocks I want in a given matchup, what that looks like. Is there a world where Bearfangs does not come in when Wild Ride does or when Pulping does, things like that. Generally speaking, it's coming in every matchup. In fact, these 9 non-blocks are coming in most matchups right now. There are definitely matchups where they don't, but I'm very much in the camp of more action points is better, and figuring out what that looks like is where I'm at with KO in general, and it felt good at the ProQuest having these cards, so they're here. Red Agile Windup has felt fantastic. I am contemplating the third copy. It's kind of hard to place right now, but we're definitely, like Clash of Agility used to be my favorite card. Red Agile Windup's my favorite card now. I just really love the offensive versatility of this being a 3-cost 7, this being a Might and Agility generator that gives Mandible Claw Go again, and this being just threatening no matter what you're doing with it. And the fact that you get to choose kind of when you're ready to on whether or not it's going to be one effect or the other, just all feels really good to me. And so I'll probably end up on the third copy, but we'll see. It's a popper for Prism now. Whether that really matters is a question for sure. that I'll get into maybe. It's something I'm still thinking about, so we'll see how much I actually talk about it. But I'm also on 3-pack hunt right now. That's just because it's a good 2 for 6, kind of in the same way that Runner is just a good 2 for 6 that sometimes has text. And I'm also trying Skull Cracks out. I'm actually going to be cutting these before the battle hardened. These were kind of just my last 2 slots. They very reasonably could have and maybe should have been Cast Bones, but I'm also currently not super in love with Cast Bones and its position in the meta, largely because I feel that Kayo a lot of the time already gets so much value, like incremental value, that what he's really looking for is things that give him tempo. And Cast Bones is not a tempo positive card. I feel it's explicitly a tempo negative card. And I don't need the extra value from points that Cast Bones gives, more so than I need the tempo that I get from other cards. I do think Skullcrack will probably end up being like, the 3rd Agile Windup, or it'll be the it might be Cast Bones again, depending on what comes up and what I decide I'm more willing to respect. I'm also trying out Clash of Might, which very realistically might be good tech into Warrior, I think. And so if I do that, then that's probably what that'll be. And you can also see Ticket on the Chins here. It's basically my no fear replacement for now, just because Hatchet Dorinthia means that Dawnblade Dorinthia is kind of just not showing up a lot. And instead of having the pseudo defense reaction, I've decidedly liked being able to create an agility token against Kano. That being said, I'm also contemplating not running any, of these effects, because even Kano, it's not always necessary, especially if the Kano player ends up doing pitch stack, not pitch stack, but I think it's called pitch stack. The version where they just go all in on stacking the combo and killing you. This effect becomes very irrelevant. I don't think Kanos are aiming to do that against KOs. I think KO is very aggressive to the point that it's hard to do that. But even against Ragamuffins, a lot of the time I felt like I haven't needed the prevention effect. So running, Wild Ride, just running the Wild Ride pulping lines and just going again as much as possible. It's felt perfectly adequate. It might be what I do instead. If there's anything else, I'm only running 1 Reckless Swing now. I think I was on 2 at the Road to Nationals. I feel good about just having 1. I think having minimum whiffs for your Wild Rides and Pulpings are very, very important. And it's something that, every point counts kind of thing. And I have really liked kind of this more aggressive build that still is capable of blocking pretty well. I mean, better than 5 for sure, which is where I'm coming from, right? And so it has felt good to have just the 1 of for when I'm, going over 60 and I want to make sure my blue proportion's right. Or, in matchups where I am worried about, this is going to be the thing that peaks damage through. But yeah, this is the deck right now. I've mentioned some of the changes. I'll probably be posting some of the changes into this list. This is a public list, so I'll have it in the description of the video as well. It also has kind of the notes that I'm going to be talking about right now with regards to how each round went, what I played against, and all of that. But I'll also transfer the information about here's the written deck tech that was on the prior one as well. So I'll get into all that eventually, and it'll be available. But for now, you can see the list, you can access it. And yeah, I'm just going to move into what the event looked like. So this is the hero spread. There were 16 unique heroes, I believe, at this event, which is a little less diverse than kind of what last RTN season pointed towards, but I think is still very diverse and very cool to see. I mean, you can see there's only 5 1-ofs of heroes as well among those 16. So pretty good for an event that had a little over 30 players, or a little less than 40 is probably more accurate actually. There's a good chunk of people. But what was really surprising to me was, obviously this was the last weekend Dromai was legal, so people were playing Dromai, but people also playing a lot of Prism. I've been trying to figure out what that's really about. I'm not super caught up with kind of the metagame shifts that people are considering post Dromai, largely because KO is KO and I like KO, and he already did well into Dromai, and he does well into a lot of the field just kind of naturally due to being a really strong hero, and to having really good, I think he rewards fundamentals really well, and so I haven't really had to worry as much about oh, how is the meta shifting, rather than how do I react to each hero. But Prism is interesting at the top because what I'm hearing is, we're in the Bay Area. This was at Forgotten Path Games, and so a lot of Prism players are just in the area. But also that Prism supposedly should do really well to Warrior, which makes sense, considering poppers being an issue and whatnot. and my understanding is also very good into Guardian, of course. So kind of some interesting stuff there. There were 6 Prisms and 5 Dromai, so 11 Illusionists overall was kind of about a third of the field essentially. And then just after that was Kayo. The 4 Kayos that were there, we were all people who are in our little Kayo Cabal chat, and are all people who we've been talking about the list and figuring out what we like and what we don't like. I know Lupine Fiasco uploaded his video already and was one of the Kayos at this event. And yeah, we were largely on different lists. Essentially, Lupine and Austin were on one list. I was on my own. I think Kusha has his own changes as well that he runs. And so, pretty decent spread of KO lists here in that sense. And then we have 3 Dorinthias. I believe 2 were Hatchets, 1 was Dawnblade. We have some Victors, we have some Kanos, our 2-0s and our 1-0s. And yeah, so very wide meta, I'd say. Maybe not as wide as kind of initially heavy hitters dropping left us with, but still quite wide. I think people are very ready for Dromai to leave and ready to play the heroes that have been kind of shut out by her, so it's exciting. And I was definitely surprised to see so few assassins. I figured more people were going to ignore the fact that Dromai just kind of is LLing, or will exist for this 1 week of ProQuest season, but maybe we'll see more in the coming weeks. I also don't know how well Azuria Arachne does into Prism. I assume not super well, so that probably helps as well on keeping them lower. I think looking at this spread, I was definitely happy to see only 5 warriors between Dorinthia and Kasai, as well as the 1 Azuri and 1 Arachne. Bolton plays differently enough from Kasai and Dory that I'm less worried about him. But those dual-wielding heroes as well as assassins are definitely kind of the heroes that produce anxieties as a KO player right now, partly because I don't have enough reps into them, but also because they do seem like the ones that can actually interact with him in a way that's relevant and in a way that can swing the game in their favor, of course. Not to say that other heroes are free wins or anything like that, more just saying like I have a very strong sense of the game plan into most heroes, but dual-wielding warriors and assassins are definitely still in progress. So there's the meta that was at this event, and now we can get into the matchups and what happened. So my first round, I paired into a Prism and lost the die roll. I'm very happy to play against Prisms. Not only does KO feel heavily favored, especially when you're playing a list that converts hands really well, but also my locals, I have Oliver, and so I've played against a lot of Prism, and Oliver plays Aura's Prism, of course, but he also has been playing some Heralds, and so I've gotten a really good sense of kind of where Prism is, and gotten a good sense of how to play against her, and so was exciting, and not exciting to be like, oh yeah, I gotta play Prism, because also Prism is definitely one of those heroes where there are outcomes that you cannot control, where she just wins, and so seeing Prism, I'm like, okay, this is a good round 1 for me. I can handle this. I know what I need to do. I know the game plan, all that. So I lost the die roll, and this Prism opponent put me second, and we had a really good game. It was definitely like close by the end, but there was definitely some really early pressure on my part that helped me kind of keep her from developing anything super stable. And at one point, she was able to actually get Soraya down, and also put me, made me deal with 2 ALS in a row. But this was after she was already like 10 or less than 10 life. And what ended up, happening as a result is like, okay, well, I'm just going to clear these ALSs. Maybe you get a little bit of value. I think at one point she put down a Genesis, alongside the ALS, but just was not really able to convert it into anything other than raw damage, really. And of course, raw damage is scary, but it's less scary when you are at like 40 to 35 and Prism is at 10, especially because of how fragile Prism becomes when she has the board state she wants due to ward and things like that. And so I just kind of set up a Blood Rush. I fought through those 2 ALS, and then as soon as I was not impeded by an ALS or by like really just ALS, I was like, cool, I'm going to play this Blood Rush and kill you now. And I did. And I think the other interesting thing about this game, and then with the matchup in general, is that Prism, at least the lag Prism, has been running Gambler's Gloves. And I think if Prism is supposed to become a very popular hero, and if I'm able to fit it, I'm going to be running Gambler's Gloves from now on, just because it's nice to be able to control the fact that her Gambler's Gloves will always be worse than ours. And the 2 block, or the 2+1 block on Apex Bonebreaker is super nice, but not always necessary when our losses are usually due to ALS pseudo loops rather than due to like being out damaged. So moving on, my second round was against Dash Inventor, against my boy Miles, playing Boost Dash. I won the die roll here and got to choose second, which was super important. I made the choice to try the weird fatigue plan I had seen kind of going around. It's not like full fatigue, but the idea of the plan is to just always prioritize blocking over attacking to the point that you don't really run your 0 block attacks, so that you can always afford to block rather than attack. I had realized when I started sideboarding that I would have to run my Red Bear Fangs to be able to do this because of how just how it lines up with the rest of my deck. Like Bear Fangs ends up feeling better than Take It on the Chin, or there were some other cards I chose not to run, like or Wild Riser Pulpings, of course. And so I ran the Bear Fangs. I did, of course, get punished and drew both of them in the same hand at one point without Tunic Up. So that was super unfortunate, but like it happens, right? I think Bear Fangs is still a very powerful card, and like if you draw just one at a time, it's extremely powerful. So it's not the worst case that I drew both of them there. And I ended up winning this game anyway. He definitely bricked a little bit toward I think a lot of it probably is more accurate, just because like at one point I fleshbagged him. He had to put max velocity in Arsenal because he couldn't do triple boost anymore, and then he just could not line up triple boost from that point. And I was still able to put in damage like each turn. Like I was still throwing a solid like 7 points, I'd say on average, and he was eating it, of course. I would block as much as possible. Then I'd be like, okay, well, here's some damage, and it got to the point where he was just low enough, like he didn't want to spend cards from hand to block because that hurts him a lot, especially with that max velocity in Arsenal. And it got to the point where he was low enough that I could just safely block a lot of the damage he was throwing, throw him the big attack, finally put him down to a point where he had to block, and he just decided to instead go into Reckless Swing range, and I ripped Reckless Swing right off the top, right when he did, which is super brutal. I think I was in a really good position, even if I didn't draw Reckless Swing there, just because at that point now I can just wait for it. But it helped a lot to draw it there because it just cleaned up the game, let it go. And yeah, I think this is a matchup I really want to test, particularly Boost Dash. I don't know if people are playing Pistol Dash into Kayo or if they're going all in on Boost, but it's definitely a weird matchup because Kayo doesn't really have the ability to fatigue. He only has the hope to outvalue her, and being able to spend cards as Dash, knowing that it won't matter because you're not going to get to the fatigue, just makes her very powerful. Makes her numbers really, really good, when that extra card from boosting isn't actually an extra card. So something I'm definitely still figuring out, but I was happy to take the win here and move on to round 3, which was against a Dromai. And this was a win as well, where I won the die roll and chose to go first. They were on Royal Dromai, so I felt good about going first. And it felt like there was some bricks early game where she kind of just wasn't really getting the setup that she needed. Towards the end of the game, she had 6 Ashwings out, but no real dragons, and hadn't really played many real dragons the whole time. And I know, like, the philosophy for Dromai into KO, which doesn't really matter anymore, but when it mattered, was essentially blocking with your dragons, playing aggressive red cards, and then winning with like Burn Them All plus Ether Ashwings. But it just didn't really pan out here. I was able to just play out these really aggressive hands over and over and over again, and by the time there was any stability at all for Dromai, she was already too low life. I was too high life. I was able to eat a lot of damage and then just kill her. Yeah, there wasn't too much to say about this matchup, honestly. She ended up having a really bad blocking hand the turn, like off my second Blood Rush Bellow, and that just like slaughtered her. Like there was no way to get out of that. So this was a pretty clean match for me. At this point, I'm 3-0 in the tournament, and I know that I have what is effectively 3 win-ins to hopefully get into the top 8. Which, of course, leads me to another Prism, which maybe is exciting, maybe isn't. This is at the top table at this point, and I end up losing this game. I lost the die roll, she went, and I went second, and the early game was really good. I mean, this Prism had to put two figments into her soul. She was taking a ton of damage. I think I got her down to 5 points before she started clawing back. And just in general, it felt like I was in a really favorable position to win. And I think there might have been a little bit of a lack of discipline on my part because of that. I think at some point there was a Genesis that I may have let live for too long, thinking that I was just going to be killing her in the next couple of turns anyway. But I'm not 100% on that. I think I also didn't have very many windows to attack the Genesis in the first place was part of it, because at one point multiple points, there were really good ALS places, like just place sounds. And I think that's why she paid so much life at one point, was because she got to basically do like ALS plus Genesis on the board at the same time. She's wearing Gambler's Gloves. I'm not, so I'm not really able to interact with that super well. She's got Soraya down. She gets to draw all these cards and play all these tones and draw more cards, looking at like 8-card hands at certain points. And I'm just like, well, I can't do a lot about this, especially because of ALS. And I'm not drawing a ton of my poppers now. I'm drawing a lot more of the blues and my Blood Rush Bellows, and I want to set up my Blood Rush Bellows, but there's also ALS going on. So a lot going on in this game. I wish I could I took a picture, or I wish I could like give a solid picture of what was happening, because it was just insanity. But by the end of the game, there's 2 ALS on the board, and I just can't win. My gloves, or him having gloves, was a really big deal. The one time I had to roll scabs, I rolled a 1 anyway though. So it's more me not having gloves was a big deal, and it's something that I do want to go back and look at, and definitely like, if gloves means that even Prism's high rolls don't win, I'm very happy to run them. I think we, generally speaking, already are super favored into Prism, but like, again, if it's a free slot and it turns that into a 100% or even like an 85%, which is already close to how it feels, then I'm happy to do it. It's probably more like a 75% right now. But yeah, Prism loss. Literally like looking at 2 ALSs and both Sorayas in play at one point. It was just very silly. And so I'm like, okay, well, I have 2 more chances to get my win in, especially if I get it next round. I'll be really happy. Which leads us to Kayo. I am playing against Lupine Fiasco here, in fact, and it's also his kind of win in situation, since and it's more so his than mine, because he had lost in round 1. And we are both on fairly different lists, which I knew, but I didn't know the extent of. I hadn't fully seen his list yet, and so I win the die roll. I get to choose second, and we flip our equipment. And I see Findel Spring Tunic, which was a surprise for me. I think I've been always on Heartstrap into Brutes because of its ability to play around Fleshbag, but that is something I'm reconsidering, especially after this game. I think while I really like Heart and Crossstrap, especially when you line it up through a Fleshbag on your Blood Rush Bellow turn, there's a chance that these games go long enough, even if only one of the KOs is the aggressor and the other one's playing mid-range, that it's worth having Tunic and getting the extra value from it. Overall, he got basically 2 claw swings out of Tunic, but was also playing more defensively to get those claw swings, while I got what was effectively a claw swing out of my Heartstrap on a Blood Rush Bellow turn. Since I was able to, like, he banished a card from my hand or whatever, I was able to use my 2 resources to swing with Claw, and then pop Heartstrap to attack with a Swing Big from Arsenal, which otherwise would have just been Swing Big instead of the Claw as well. So Blood Rush Bellow made the value pretty close. I mean, 5 versus 6, right? But also being able to pressure off of Blood Rush Bellow. But I think generally the Spring Tunic did have a lot of value because it also blocks for 1 at some point. So kind of interesting. Something I'm going to be re-looking at, particularly for the KO matchup. I think against Labaya, I'll probably keep Heartstrap still, just because that matchup has felt very important to be aggressive in. But it definitely has made me reevaluate Heartstrap a little bit. Not to mention the new chess piece coming out kind of changes things a lot anyway, but that's another 3 weeks of ProQuest away anyway. So anyway, with this game, it kind of was very close, fairly close. I was having a really good aggressive lead, and then at one point, Lupine plays for the pulping pop Tunic for Bearfang's line, and he blocked with 2 cards on this turn because I threw a really good CNC at him, obviously threatening that Bearfangs, and he draws and discards a Blood Rush Bellow, which notably he had not seen Blood Rush Bellows very much prior to this. And something interesting about that to me was I realized that there's a math that we can do with our draw discards, especially when they're on the blind, to see kind of whether or not they're worth going for on the blind, and whether or not there's ways that we need to learn how to play around that as Kayos. And I'm still kind of working on the theory, but essentially, if you've seen what it turned out was if you've seen 30 cards and you're running, in this case Lupine was running Cast Bones. So if you see 30 cards and you have Cast Bones and Blood Rush Spell in your deck, and you've only seen one of those two whiffs, like one copy of them, and 30 cards includes what you've pitched, so you kind of have to be keeping track of pitch deck and stuff to do this. But at that point in the game, you have just as good of odds of rolling a 1 on Scabskins as you do of drawing and discarding the whiff. That being said, the math on whether or not that's positive, worthy EV changes because rolling a 2 or a 3 on Scabskins does not change your result. Whereas rolling a 2 or 3 in this case, you're pulping, swinging, and not drawing and discarding a whiff, is the good outcome. Like pulping in that case was a 2 through 6 of a hit with a 1 being the whiff. And so I think there's some EV calculations or ED calculations to be done based on like the Tariq Patel Twitter article and things like that. But I think generally speaking, he made the right play of doing this pulping line because pulping into Bare Fangs there would have been very powerful, especially if he doesn't hit any whiffs off the top. But he does hit the whiff. I'm able to block with 2 cards. It was a very bad feeling to have, like, pulping is a funny card because the fact that it requires the 2 card block is very relevant. It's like always correct to give it the 2 cards because the second card is worth the 3 it blocks for plus the minimum, in this case, the 3 that Mandible Claw was worth. And that's kind of what convinced me to block. I was like, okay, I'm getting 6 points off this 1 card. And I don't usually get the opportunity to get these 6 points. Whereas it turned out I was really getting a ton more because of the Bare Fangs in Arsenal. But, pulping's a little annoying because you're like, well, I want to do my Blood Rush turn. Well, you have to, show the discipline. Don't just fucking throw things around, right? It's kind of the realization for me. But yeah, I think this game, he played really well. I feel like I played really well. Just kind of all around. I kind of had the better beats, which you kind of expect. I used my Fleshbag before him, but I also saw Blood Rush Bellows and got to play them, which he didn't. And I definitely would value Blood Rush Bellow over Scowling in that matchup, so it makes sense. Just those are the general thoughts, though. It's very rambly, but that matchup was very good, I think. I think it was very close. I do want to go back and consider whether or not Reckless Swing should be in the deck in this matchup, but I also really like being able to just full aggro, not think about it at all. And so I'm also very happy not to run it. Moving on to round 6, we play against a Kano. This is specifically Majin Bay. So Lupine Fiasco's teammate, which means he's gotten plenty of KO reps, but also a very good Kano in general. I'm sure anyone local in California knows him, but anyone in general probably also knows him. He is very prominently showing up in Battle Hardens and whatnot, doing very well for himself on Kano. And we were both locked in at this point for the top 8, and so he tried pitch deck against me, and it ended up going really well for him. Unfortunately, what ended up happening was I had some pulpings line up, and I was just playing them out because my hand was like a red and a yellow otherwise, plus the blue that I pitched to pulping. And what ended up keep happening was, and specifically Beast Within, this was the yellow. What ended up happening was 3 turns in a row, I drew into pulping and swung it at him, and he played a defense reaction from Arsenal. So he managed to like just line up kind of having the Fate or the Sink Below in Arsenal all 3 of those turns in a row. And if any of those pulpings were wild rides, I think I have a much closer chance in that game. But just not what happened. And it was very funny. I think in hindsight, I had a CNC in hand. I think the other card, the red, was the CNC, and I should have just played it and played a little slower. I haven't really played against pitch deck too much, so I wasn't sure kind of what I was doing yet. I have a much better sense of like, okay, they can't really go off until they get rid of all these cards anyway, or at least until they're under their combo. So it's safe to kind of just convert big hands and you're not rushed as much. So something I'm thinking about, something I'm figuring out. I don't expect Kanos to pitch deck into us because that felt like a high roll on his part, in the sense of like getting those blocks and me not knowing the matchup too well. So maybe not a high roll is the right word, but like it felt like an anomaly of the matchup. And I think I wouldn't expect that to be the common outcome against pitch deck. So I wasn't really able to convert hands. He was able to do his 80 damage, Aether Wildfire stuff. And I'm contemplating whether or not we even need a instant that prevents 2 even against Ragamuffins now, especially if pitch deck does become the way. It feels completely unnecessary, but kind of, we'll see. But anyway, lose this round. We're 4-2 in the Swiss. We're locked for top 8. It's not a huge deal. I think by the end of that, I was 6th place because I was the highest or second highest 4-2 possible. And we move on to Prism again in the quarterfinals. This is the same Prism I actually lost to in the Swiss. And this game goes much better than the Swiss game does. Opponent chose to go first because I was the lower seed, and it was not nearly the setup just wasn't nearly as there as it was in our first game. And I was especially able to set up kind of just tossing these 6-3-6 lines almost every turn of just getting the Wild Ride or the Pulping, going into a Mandible Claw, going into another attack. There were a couple instances where I lost some value on like I definitely lost like 6 points of value off the random draw discards at one point, but like that happens, and it did not end up mattering because I was just able to push so much. Compared to the like 10 cards Soraya drew in our Swiss game, I think Soraya only drew 2 cards here, and so that was significantly helpful in being able to clear him out. And I also got a really nice lineup where I had a feeling he had Soul Shield. I think he had an Arsenal or like it was in his hand. There was just something that told me he had Soul Shield. I remember kind of intuiting it. And I played a CNC at him while his other blocks were horrible. And so he kind of just had to lose his Arsenal, and that felt really good as well. Moving on to the semifinals, it was against another Prism. This time, Oliver, who had been talking about how, oh, my Prism deck's bad or whatever. I'm not going to make any. Of course, he's in the semifinals of this event and doing quite well. And I end up with a higher seed. I choose to go first against him, finally getting to choose to go first against the Prism here. And he was on the lag plan. So definitely trying out what felt like was working better for him than the Auras plan into Kayo. And it was a very close game. I had a power for early lead, but he was doing a really good job of kind of clawing it back. And I think I did the right thing of like clearing auras when I needed to and kind of respecting the fact that he was going in on me. There was definitely a turn where I cleared an aura and I should have gone after him because it turned out he had no blocks, but it's hard to predict that, I'd say. Prism does run a lot of non-blocks, so maybe I should have been thinking about how many I had seen at that point, but I don't feel bad for killing auras, especially since, I won the game anyway. But definitely an interesting situation where like sometimes it's right to clear, sometimes it's not. It really just depends on the situation. It depends on how much Prism's able to take advantage of you not clearing her auras if you don't. Especially if she plays another important aura. It's like suddenly when one really important aura like ALS or Genesis comes down, things like the Merciful or the Passing Mirage become even more important because they're just this incremental value or even exponential. But eventually I'm able to get a really good Blood Rush turn after the ALSs are done with, and it just kills him. There's nothing he can do. At some point he has to like draw off Tome, but he doesn't have a card in his soul, so it only drew 2 cards, or like the 2 cards instead of 3, and he's just looking at his hand, he's going, oh, I'm dead. And so I was able to clear it from there. And then that was basically it for the tournament, because in the finals I pair into Austin, who had been doing really well with his KO deck. It was the same as Lupine Fiascos. And we decide, instead of playing it out, I have 3 people I need to get home, and I'm not, he wanted to go to Amsterdam. I'm not necessarily in the position to go to Amsterdam, or at least not in the position to like win a ProQuest and then decide, well, guess I'm going to Amsterdam in July. And so I accepted the gold foil Code of Frost plus, or gold foil envelope. We didn't know it was a Code of Frost yet. And a split of the money down the middle. And of course, open my gold foil, because that's what we do. And it was a Code of Frost. So, maybe shouldn't have opened it. But also, I opened a Snappies before. I'm still positive EV between 2 gold foil envelopes now. I will happily open the 3rd one when I get it. So there's that. I think it's cool that it's a Code of Frost. I might hang it on the wall or something if I don't sell it. Or I might mutilate it and put it onto my Mandible Claw in a true brute fashion. But yeah, overall, the event felt very good. I think I'm really happy with the list. It's definitely feeling much closer than it felt even at the RTN and even where people were at in LA. I made these notes, of course, in the Fab area as well, but I'm definitely going to be looking at whether or not I want the 3rd Agile Windup, definitely looking at Clash of Might as a way to combat warriors. And then Gambler's Gloves for Prism. I think if Prism's as popular as she was at this event, I'll be happy to have them. I also think it's a very free slot right now because there are a couple of flex slots due to the lack of versatile options that Brute has for matchups like Assassin and Warrior. Since we are so locked on, these 6+ power cards, if you're ignoring like the power cards like Cast Bones and Bloodrush Bellow, and you're just looking at options that KO has for cards that fulfill the having 5 or more power, there's something like only 140 cards in that card pool. And so because of that, things like stopping Azuri from doing what Azuri does is much more difficult than it is for a hero that can run Sync Blows and Favor Scenes, or is able to just out aggro even harder like Fi kind of used to. So things to figure out for sure. But I think in general, I feel very happy with this list. I'll be uploading it. People are welcome to give it a try, welcome to give me feedback on it. I know the Cabal, we've had plenty of chats about the different card choices that we're running. I definitely am thinking about going back to Cast Bones, but we'll see. I think, again, I'd rather have cards that help me in my bad matchups or, help get me some equity in matchups that I'm not super confident in, rather than cards that I know win me games in my great matchups. Like, I feel good into Guardian no matter what, so feels like Cast Bones might not be necessary. But again, I might run it this weekend. We'll see. It's definitely things to check out. But all this will be in the description. Hope this was interesting. I know it was very rambly, but I figure getting my thoughts out over voice would be a little more helpful than the words I've written in the Fabrary, just because I have a lot more that I think about than I write. And I'm always happy to take questions, whether in the comments or on Discord. And I'm also always happy to just talk shop. So if anyone has any questions about KO, any thoughts about KO that they want to share, please share them with me. I'd love to see them, and I'd love to share back. So thank you.